My family cut me off because I refused to donate my kidney to my addict brother. I'm the kind of person who used to think family is everything. I believed in it like people believe in gravity. Unquestionably, blindly. I grew up thinking blood was thicker than water, that loyalty to your family was the ultimate moral compass. But after what happened last year, I realized that sometimes the people who are supposed to love you the most are the ones who are most willing to tear you apart if you stop being useful to them. My name's Rachel. I'm 29. I used to have a mother, father, older brother, and a younger sister. Now, I guess I technically still do, but none of them speak to me anymore. They pretend I don't exist. All because I wouldn't hand over a piece of my body to someone who has spent more than half his life destroying his. My older brother, Jason, is 3 years older than me. From as early as I can remember, he was the golden child, not just spoiled, revered. If Jason brought home a C on a math test, my mom would say, "He must have had a hard day." If I brought home an A-, she'd say, "What happened to the plus?" He was always in trouble. Small at first, stealing candy, ditching school, setting off fireworks in our neighbor's yard. But it escalated fast. By 14, he was smoking weed. By 16, it was pills. At 17, he stole my dad's car and crashed into a ditch on prom night. He walked away with a sprained wrist. My parents covered the whole thing up. They blamed the weather. I was the good kid, the one who kept quiet, got straight A's, cleaned the kitchen, helped my little sister with her homework. But in our house, being good got you ignored. Being a disaster, that got you love, attention, bail money, rehab stays, over and over again. Jason's drug problem was never a secret. What was a secret was how much he cost us. My parents would pretend everything was fine, but I remember nights where the power got shut off. I'd ask my mom, "Why is it so cold?" And she'd lie, "Must be a power outage." I found out later they'd spent the utility bill money on Jason's lawyer fees. In 2020, right after the world turned upside down with COVID, Jason OD'd. Fentanyl. He was in a coma for 2 days. That was the first time I really saw my mom cry. Not just cry, scream. It was like something primal escaped her body. She collapsed in the ER hallway, gripping the edge of her coat, like it was the only thing keeping her tethered to the world. He survived. Barely. He spent a month in a treatment center. We all dared to hope maybe that was rock bottom. Maybe he'd change. He didn't. 6 months later, he was using again, and not just pills. Meth now. My sister, Julia, who was 20 at the time, tried to get through to him. He screamed at her and punched a hole in her bedroom door. My dad paid for the drywall repair and told her she shouldn't have provoked him. It was around then that I started going low contact. I was still coming home for holidays, still trying to be the good daughter, but every visit left me feeling drained, invisible, and increasingly angry. I felt like I was watching my family slowly burn down a house while telling me it was just a bit smoky. Flash forward to May 2024. I was living in my own apartment, working remotely for a financial firm, and honestly, doing well. I was in therapy. I had boundaries. I hadn't spoken to Jason in over a year. I was the healthiest I'd ever been emotionally, which is probably why what happened next hit so hard. It started with a voicemail from my dad. His voice sounded off, serious, shaky. "Hey, Ratch, we need to talk. It's about Jason. Please call us back." I didn't want to. I really didn't want to. But guilt is a hell of a thing. So I called. Jason's kidneys were failing. Years of drug abuse had caught up to him. His doctor said he needed a transplant within a year, or he'd likely be on dialysis permanently. If he even made it that far, I went silent. Not because I was shocked. I wasn't. I knew something like this would happen eventually. But I was already bracing for the next thing my dad would say. And then he said it. "We were hoping you'd get tested. See if you're a match." Not, "Would you consider it?" Not, "We want you to think about it." No, it was, "We were hoping you'd do it." Like it was already decided. I told them I needed time to think. My mom called me that night. She didn't ask how I was. She launched right in. "You're his sister. You can save his life. Don't you want to be able to live with yourself? I tried to explain I wasn't ready to make that kind of decision, that it wasn't simple. That organ donation isn't just a trip to the doctor's office. She interrupted me. You're being selfish. If it were you, he wouldn't even hesitate. That made me laugh, bitterly. Yes, he would. I said, he wouldn't even show up. That didn't go over well. She hung up on me. A week later, I got a group text. My parents, Julia, even Jason. Please do the right thing, Rachel. Don't abandon your family. This is your chance to make up for being so cold all these years. That last one, that was Jason. The man who hadn't spoken to me in 2 years was now telling me I owed him. I considered it. Honestly, I went to a consultation. I talked to a transplant coordinator. I took the basic compatibility tests. I was a match. I cried the entire ride home. Not out of fear, not out of guilt, but because I knew what would happen if I said yes. I knew they'd use it as a reason to never change. Jason would take his permission to keep doing what he's always done. Destroy and take and destroy again. My parents would keep enabling him. And I would spend the rest of my life resenting myself for feeding that cycle. So I said no. I told them clearly, calmly, that I was choosing not to go forward, that I loved them. But I wasn't willing to give a piece of my body to someone who had never respected my boundaries, my safety, or my existence. They didn't scream. They didn't plead. They just went silent. My calls went unanswered. My texts left on read. Julia, who used to be the closest to me, sent me a single message. You've changed. I don't even recognize you anymore. My parents took me off the family group chat. They uninvited me from Thanksgiving. My mom blocked me on Facebook. Jason? He posted a cryptic status a week later. Some people would rather let their own blood die than be inconvenienced. But God sees everything. And that was it. They were gone. Not dead, just gone. Like I'd never been born. That's how it ends. Or maybe how it starts. I sit here in my apartment, wondering if I'm the villain in someone else's story. Maybe I am. But if standing up for myself makes me the bad guy, then I think I'd rather be the villain than the victim. I didn't choose to lose my family. They chose to lose me. The silence was louder than any fight. You'd think when a family disowns you, there'd be screaming, slammed doors, dramatic scenes like in movies. But this was quiet, almost surgical. One day, they were in my life, tangled in every thread of my thoughts. And the next, they vanished, like they hit delete on me. And the worst part? Nobody else even seemed to notice. The first few days after I said no were weirdly peaceful. I felt like I just walked out of a burning building and slammed the door behind me. But the peace didn't last. By day 3, I was compulsively checking my phone, opening old texts, rereading the messages they sent before everything broke. There was this stupid part of me, the little girl version of me, who kept hoping I'd wake up to a long apology message. Something like, "We're sorry. We were scared. We shouldn't have pressured you. Please come home." But it never came. Instead, my mom started telling extended family I had abandoned Jason. She didn't say I refused to be a donor. No, she framed it like I ghosted a dying brother out of coldness. She called it a spiritual betrayal. My aunt forwarded me a Facebook post where my mom had written, "The hardest thing in life is realizing your children don't always turn out how you raise them." I laughed when I saw that, not because it was funny, but because she raised Jason too, and somehow I was the one who didn't turn out. When you lose your family, you assume your friends will be your safety net. Some were, but others, not so much. One friend, Allison, told me flat out, I think I'd do it if it were my brother. You only need one kidney, right? I tried explaining that Jason had abused me emotionally for years, that he'd stolen from our parents, attacked our sister, torched every chance he'd ever been given, that his odds of staying sober, even with a transplant, weren't high. She shrugged. Still, he's your brother. I stopped texting her after that. I realized that for people who grew up in healthy families, ones where the worst conflict was about who hosted Christmas, my story made no sense. They couldn't imagine cutting off a parent, let alone saying no to a dying sibling. But they didn't live in my house. They didn't see what I saw. I couldn't sleep for weeks. My mind kept spiraling backward. I'd lie in bed and remember things I'd buried, like the time Jason broke into my room at 15, stole my savings jar, and bought pills. My parents made me apologize for not locking my door, or the time he tried to drive drunk with Julia in the car. She was 10. He was 18. I stopped him, literally stood in front of the car and refused to move, and my mom said I was escalating things. Or the time he overdosed and I was the one who found him, blue-lipped on the floor. I was 19. I did CPR until the EMTs arrived. And you know what my dad said? Don't tell anyone what happened. We don't need neighbors talking. All those memories rushed in now that the guilt fog had cleared, and I started to realize something important. They didn't love me. Not really. Not for me. They loved the idea of me. The quiet daughter. The helpful one. The reliable fallback plan. The spare part. I'd been in therapy on and off for a couple years, but after this, I went back weekly. My therapist, God bless her, didn't sugarcoat anything. What you did was an act of self-preservation. Your family's reaction confirms that they never saw you as an autonomous person. They saw you as a resource. Hearing that broke me, because deep down, I'd known it for a long time. But having someone say it made it real. And it made me wonder, how long had I been tolerating conditional love? How many holidays had I shown up to, smiling through gritted teeth, knowing Jason would steal the spotlight? How many times had I swallowed my own pain to keep the peace? Too many. Way too many. About 2 months after the cutoff, I got a message on Instagram from someone I never expected. Jason's ex-girlfriend. We'll call her Tara. I hadn't seen or spoken to her since they broke up, probably 3 years ago now. She'd always been sweet, kind of soft-spoken, with this haunted look in her eyes. Jason treated her like dirt, but she stuck around way longer than she should have. Her message said, "Hey, Rachel, I heard what happened. I just wanted to say, I think you did the right thing. I know how hard it must have been. If you ever need someone to talk to, I'm here." I replied, cautiously. We ended up chatting for hours. Turns out, Jason had been physically abusive toward her. She'd covered the bruises with makeup, hid the broken plates, lied to her own family about why she flinched when he walked into her room. She told me something else, too. He faked a suicide attempt once to keep her from leaving. That shook me, because I'd always known Jason was broken, but I hadn't known how far it went, how much he was willing to manipulate, hurt, destroy, just to keep control. She ended our conversation with, "You save your own life by walking away. I wish I had done it sooner." 3 months in, I got a letter from a lawyer. Not a lawsuit. Not quite, but close. My parents had taken out a medical loan in Jason's name for preliminary transplant consultations and added me as a guarantor, without my consent. I was livid. I called the lawyer and explained everything. Thankfully, they backed off once they realized the signature wasn't mine. But the audacity of it stunned me. They were willing to forge my name to pay for a surgery I never agreed to. That's not desperation. That's entitlement. That's them seeing me not as a daughter, but as a tool. Thanksgiving came. I stayed home. I made stuffing and mashed potatoes for one, poured wine, tried to watch a Hallmark movie. Turned it off after 10 minutes. It made me sick. All those fake families smiling, hugging, learning to forgive. It felt like a cruel joke. I got drunk, cried into my cat's fur, fell asleep on the couch. Christmas wasn't much better. Julia posted a photo on Instagram, the whole family around the tree. Jason in a hoodie, looking thin and hollow. My parents beaming like nothing had happened. They didn't mention me once. No call, no text, not even a passive-aggressive card. It was like I had died, but nobody mourned. The question that haunted me. I kept asking myself the same thing, over and over. Did I make the right choice? Not logically. Logically, I knew I did. I knew giving Jason my kidney wouldn't fix him. I knew it would only delay the inevitable and destroy me in the process. But emotionally, spiritually, I kept dreaming about hospital beds, waking up with stitches, tubes, an empty space where something used to be. Only in the dreams, it wasn't my kidney that was missing, it was my heart. Like I'd given away, and nobody even said thank you. One night, around 2 a.m., I opened a blank document and just started typing. Not a Reddit post, not even a journal entry, just the truth. I wrote down everything. The lies, the gaslighting, the guilt, the pressure, the pain. I let it spill out of me like poison being drained. When I finished, I sat back and realized something. I didn't regret saying no. I regretted not saying no sooner. I regretted the years I spent chasing love that came with conditions. I regretted ever thinking I had to bleed to earn my place in the family. And for the first time in months, I slept soundly. When your world is shattered, you don't rebuild it all at once. You gather the pieces slowly, painfully, and try to figure out what still fits. I thought saying no to Jason and getting cut off by my family was the climax of my story. The moment everything cracked and collapsed. But it wasn't. It was just the first fracture. Because a few months after fallout, I found out something that changed how I saw everything. Not just my family, but my entire childhood. It started with a storage unit. In March 2025, I got a call from a manager at a youth storage facility about 20 minutes outside my hometown. They asked for Rachel Stevens. I confirmed. We have a unit here under your name. It's been unpaid for 3 months. Just letting you know it's scheduled for auction if you don't come settle the bill. My blood went cold. I had never rented a storage unit. I asked for details. The account had been opened in July 2024, 2 months after I said no to donating my kidney. The email associated with the account was my dad's, but the lease was in my name. The credit card on file had been declined. I told the manager I suspected identity fraud. He paused. Then he quietly said, "If you want to come down and show your ID, we'll let you look at the contents before the auction." I didn't know what I expected. Maybe just junk, old furniture, trash. But what I found, that changed everything. There were only a few items inside the unit. A rusted bike, some broken speakers, a suitcase, and a large plastic tote with my name written on it in Sharpie. Inside the tote was a stack of documents, 2 burned CDs, a dozen envelopes with my old report cards, and a thick medical file. Jason's medical file. At first, I didn't understand what I was looking at. Lab results, doctor's notes, referral letters. But then I saw a printed email thread between my mom and a transplant coordinator. The subject line, need help convincing daughter to become kidney donor. I froze. The email was dated June 18th, 2024. 3 days before I was even told Jason needed a transplant. I read every word of that thread in a cold, detached haze. My mom had reached out to the transplant center's coordinator under her own name, pretending to be me. She asked, "How soon can I be tested for a match? My family is pressuring me, and I don't want to look selfish." Then, 2 days later, she sent another email. "My daughter is extremely stubborn and has a history of distancing herself. We need to show her how serious this is. Any chance you could call her and explain the urgency? Maybe she'll respond better to an expert." That wasn't all. She attached a sample letter for me to sign, giving them permission to access my medical records. The only problem? I never saw that letter. I never signed it. And even worse, one version of it was already signed. My signature. In sloppy, almost cartoonish handwriting. I flipped through the rest of the documents. At least 3 forms, including a consent waiver, had been signed in my name. My own mother had forged them. The confrontation. I sat on that discovery for a week. I didn't know what to do. File a report? Confront her? Burn it all? In the end, I called Julia. I hadn't spoken to her in nearly 6 months. She picked up on the 3rd ring, hesitant. "Rachel?" I didn't waste time. I told her about the storage unit, the forged forms, the emails. I half expected her to hang up. She didn't. She cried. Hard. Not just the soft weeping of someone embarrassed, but full-blown sobs, like she'd been holding something in for months. Then she told me her own secret. 3 weeks after I said no to the transplant, Julia had been approached by our parents with a new idea. Maybe you should consider being the donor, they said. Julia had a heart condition, a mild one, but enough to make her ineligible as a donor. When she reminded them of that, they waved it off. The doctors don't have to know everything, my mom allegedly said. That was when Julia realized something chilling. They weren't just desperate. They were willing to cheat the system to save Jason. She asked him point blank, "Would you really risk my life, Riz?" My dad's answer, "We've already almost lost him once. We can't go through that again." Not no, not of course not. Just that. After that, Julia started distancing herself, too, but quietly. She didn't want to get cut off like I had. When I asked her if she knew about the storage unit, she hesitated. I knew they were hiding things, but not that. About 2 weeks after the call with Julia, I sent my mom a letter, not an angry one, just factual. I laid out what I'd found, the forged documents, the email thread, the proof. I ended the letter with a single line. If you want to respond, do it honestly. Otherwise, don't contact me again. She didn't respond, but my dad did, via email. 3 sentences. We only did what we thought was right. You've always been so cold, Rachel. Maybe this is who you were all along. That was it. No apology, no denial, no ownership. Just more gaslighting, more projection, more of them. I brought the whole file to my next therapy session, dumped it on the coffee table, like a corpse. My therapist flipped through it slowly, taking it in. Then she looked at me and said something that I still think about often. You were never the daughter they wanted. You were the daughter they needed until you stopped giving. It was like she'd opened a door I didn't even know was locked. Jason's still alive, barely. He's on dialysis. Still using, from what Julia hears. My parents pretend he's recovering. They post vague things on Facebook about faith and healing, but never mention his addiction. Never mention me. Julia and I talk now. Not every day, but often enough. She's angry, not just at them, but at herself, too. She says she spent too long trying to be the peacekeeper. Now she's starting to understand that peace built on silence isn't peace. It's surrender. Here's what nobody tells you about cutting off toxic family. It doesn't feel good. It feels like grief, like pulling your own teeth out, like standing in the rain with a box of memories and no one to hand them to. But it's real, and it's yours. And for the first time in my life, I know who I am without them. Not the fixer, not the donor, not the afterthought. Just Rachel, still healing, still angry, but finally free.